All right. Notice is hereby given of the regular meeting of the Board of Education of the Town of Westfield in the County of Union, New Jersey at 6 p.m. on the evening of Tuesday, April 27th, 2021. The board meeting will be held via an online platform, which can be accessed at the board tab on the district website. The meeting can also be accessed by phone at 1-415-655-0001, access code 120-712-0831. The purpose of the meeting is to transact the regular business of the board and any other business to come properly before the board. The board will move immediately into private session to discuss matters rendered confidential by state and federal law, including negotiations and legal matters. The public portion of the meeting will resume at 7 p.m. This is to advise the general public and to instruct that it be recorded in the minutes that in compliance with Chapter 231 of the Public Laws of 1975, entitled the Open Public Meetings Act, the Westfield School Board on Thursday, April 22nd, 2021, caused to be posted at the office of the Board of Education located at 302 Elm Street, Westfield, New Jersey, and delivered to the Westfield Leader, the Star Ledger, the Westfield Library, Town Clerk of Westfield, Tap into Westfield, and Patch.com, a meeting notice setting forth the time, date, and location of this meeting. Members of the public will be allowed to make public comments twice during the virtual meeting. In the beginning of the meeting, the public may comment on agenda items only, and at the end of the meeting, the public can comment on any topic. At the appropriate time on the agenda, the Q&A window will be opened for public access. If you wish to address the board, please type in your name and address. Individuals who are calling into the meeting and wish to speak can touch *3 to access the raise your hand function, which will notify a staff member that you want to speak. When your name is called, a staff member will unmute your microphone. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. Please note that if any member of the public becomes disruptive during the remote meeting, the board president may mute the speaker's microphone. Continued disruptions may result in removal from the virtual meeting. Dana, can we have a roll call, please?
Sahar Aziz, Mike Beelan,
Here.
Brendan Galligan,
Here.
Rob Garrison,
Here.
Layla Morelli, Gretchen Olig, Tara Porto,
Here.
Sonal Patel, Amy Root.
Here. All right. Brendan, would you lead us in a flag salute?
I'd be happy to. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, I would like the board to consider the following resolution. Be it resolved that the Board of Education move into private session for the purpose of discussing matters rendered confidential by state and federal law, negotiations and legal matters, and be it further resolved that any discussion held by the board which need not remain confidential, and the results of the discussion will be made public as soon as practicable. Could I have a second, please? Thanks, Rob. All in favor, moving to private session? Aye. Okay. Yeah.
See you in a minute.
Okay, great. Thanks, folks. See you on the other link.
Sorry, who's the link from, Amy?
I think it's from Dana.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Hey, Barbara. Oh, this is weird. You can be in 2 WebEx meetings at the same time now. I forgot to leave the last one.
You don't cross the streams.
I heard you saying that before I signed into this. I heard you saying that before I signed into this meeting. Does that mean I'm in 2 meetings right now?
No, you were still in the last one.
Did you close it?
Yeah, I closed it now, but I was in both for a second. I didn't think you could do that.
So there's nobody in your public session meeting now, right?
The Brian Ocker is there with it. Well, it's his computer is on with a note saying that we're in private session, but none of us are in.
But Tara, you're still in the public one.
Oh, I am?
Yeah, so you'll see me. This is the public.
Oh, wait, hold on a minute. Okay, got it. All right.
So I'll see you later.
Mary, that's Marianne.
Yeah, so this is still the public link. There you go.
Now they got it.
Yeah, hopefully their audio is not, because I was still hearing people.
Yeah, it was, but no, I don't hear any audio now anymore. It was just because Tara was in, so she should be good.
Okay.
And now the message is up.
Okay, I'll see you in an hour.
Sounds good.
Okay, bye. Although Brian, I don't know if you can see, but the screen I'm seeing is not full screen. I'm seeing the, the PowerPoint screen. Now I'm seeing,
Hang on.
okay. I'm just saying this because I don't think you can see what I'm seeing, correct?
Correct. Actually, I can. So
Like I'm seeing the presenter view. Hey, oh.
no, hang on. There, now that's the full slide.
No, it's the presenter view. So I see the black and the, for you to control it. I don't see it full screen.
Okay. Let's try that.
There we go. That's it.
Okay, see you in an hour.
Yes, you will. Bye.
Sahar.
Aye.
Hoping to have Gretchen and Sonal join us soon. Everybody's boxes are moving for me. We're still recording, right, Brian? Okay. All of my idle chit chat.
Amy, if you look up at the top, there's a little red circle near
Yep, thank
the
you.
X. That's just
Yep.
recording.
Yep, got it. Got it. All right, maybe till 7:01. We got everybody from our private session now, so that's good. I think. Well, I guess we should probably go ahead and get things moving this evening. We have enough of a quorum that we can continue. So we are back in public session. Before we move forward, Dr. Dolan, I believe you had something you wanted to say before we proceed any further, correct?
I do. Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
So over the weekend, one of our high school custodians died. Richard Perez worked the night shift so that he could watch his 3-year-old daughter during the day while his wife worked. Mr. Perez was hardworking, he was a welcoming, caring person, and he was a valued member of the high school community. And I would just like everyone to join me for a moment of silence in respect and honor for Mr. Richard Perez. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Very sad. I'm glad to see that there's been a GoFundMe fundraiser that's been started for people. So I know there's links to that out there. So we certainly hope that the community can do what we can to support his family. That's terribly sad.
Yes.
Let's see, moving along. Public hearing on the 2021-2022 budget. Dana, are you ready if I go directly to
am.
you? All
Yes,
right,
I am.
take it
Good
away.
evening. All right, good evening, everyone. Brian, can you start the presentation? So as you know, we've been talking about the budget for several months now. On March 16th, the Board of Ed, you approved the tentative budget, which we submitted to the county superintendent. The county business administrator and county superintendent have reviewed the budget and have approved the budget. So this is the last stage of the budget process where we'll be adopting hopefully the final budget this evening. So next slide, Brian. So again, here's the calendar. We've talked about this numerous times. We're at the last stage of this, and the budget was advertised in the Westfield Leader on Thursday in accordance with the statutes set by the state after county approval and within the timelines for the public hearing. Next, Brian. The goals, we set, the board set budgetary goals back in, I believe it was December, we had a board meeting. The parameters that we set at that time were to maintain class sizes within our policy guidelines, to maintain funding for recently approved courses, to maintain funding for school resource officers in the schools. We wanted to keep our fund balance at the 2% level. Also to keep the budget within the 2% cap for the tax levy plus any eligible waivers. We did take a look at the Chromebook initiative that we started this year to see if that made sense for next year when we're building next year's budget. And we also, of course, had to keep the pandemic in mind and be sure that we budgeted appropriately for that, and to see if there were any reallocation of funds as a result of remote learning. Next slide, Brian. So the budget that we finalized, the impact to the average taxpayer, the tax levy is at the state cap for the tax levy. So that's a 2% increase on the school tax levy. That translates to a tax rate of 1.66%. And the reason that it's less than 2% is because the ratables in town have gone up since last year. So a 2% increase is actually less than a 2% increase for the tax rate. So an average homeowner in Westfield will see an increase in their school taxes of about $170 a year. So the sources of revenue. As we've talked in the past, the major part of our revenue comes from local tax levy. It's roughly 93% of the budget. The other areas that are much smaller are fund balance. So from the fund balance that we do generate every year, we appropriate $750,000 of that annually to help reduce taxes. $5.5 million is from state aid. We have another $975,000 approximately from extraordinary aid. And then we have an estimated interest income of $500,000, and then other tuitions, student activity fees, and other miscellaneous fees that are about $553,000. And that makes up the total revenue side of the budget. The state aid, as I mentioned earlier, the basic state aid is $5.5 million. That's a $1 million increase from last year. And all of that increase was in the area of special ed. You will see that we also received transportation state aid as well as security state aid. I also mentioned in the previous slide that there is a category of aid called extraordinary aid. That's aid that we actually have to submit an application to in order to receive those funds. We are in the process of submitting that application now. We won't know what the amount is that we get for extraordinary aid until probably July. So we actually will have to wait to close out our books for the 2021 year until we receive that notice from the state, because that will impact this year's budget. So for next year, we budgeted the same thing, but that's really kind of a guess because we don't even know what the 2021 number is at this point. And then our debt service aid did go up a little bit as well. That's okay, you can go, Brian. So although we were thrilled to get another $1 million this year in state aid, if you look at what the formula actually would generate for us, we are still significantly behind what we should be receiving. And formula would estimate that our state aid should be about $7.3 million. So we're still significantly behind that, but we are happy that we got the $1 million this year, and hopefully next year they will continue to increase state aid in order to get us closer to what the actual formula aid looks like. And our enrollment, we've talked about this at every meeting in this year in the past. So our enrollment did dip a little bit this year, as did many other districts. Some of that are people moving their children to private schools because some of them are able to accommodate full day because of the reduced numbers of students, and some are homeschooled. And we expect that to probably tick back up next year to previous levels. But we have been pretty steady since about 2010 in the 6,200 to 6,300 range with minor fluctuations each year. The expense side of the budget. So as we've also discussed before, about 80% of our budget is for salary and benefits. That's the major expense for us is people and labor. We have another 3% that we spend on outside providers. That's for behaviorists, occupational therapists, physical therapists, and legal costs. 7% of our budget approximately goes to tuition for students that attend programs in out-of-district placements. And those are driven by IEPs, individual education plans for special ed students. And then the other smaller parts of the budget, we have about 6% that we spend on transportation and insurance costs, and very little on supplies, materials, and cleaning is really very small. At one of our previous meetings, we did talk about the capital budget, and that obviously supplements the 1% that we spend out of the operating budget for our very old buildings. Next slide, please, Brian. And so the 80% of our budget that is staffing, about 74% is for teachers and regular ed teachers, special ed teachers, and paraprofessionals. So those are obviously the staff that are working directly in the classroom with the students. Then we have another about 6.7%, and that's for nurses, guidance, and librarians. So again, those are staff members that work directly with students on a daily basis. And then much smaller percentages would be the principal supervisors, about 6% of our budget, and operations, which is our custodial maintenance, as well as our, and then our maintenance staff and our central office staff. So that's roughly 10% of our budget. I mean, our staffing. And so our cost per pupil, this data comes directly from the Department of Education. They take audited numbers from every school district. They do take some expenses out of the calculation in order to be comparable from district to district. So for example, they take out of district tuition out of the calculation because that isn't comparable. You know, one student can cost a tremendous amount of money and make these numbers not apples to apples comparisons. So with this comparative cost per pupil as the state calculates, and the most recent numbers we have are 2017-18. They haven't updated those numbers yet. But we are at the lowest of all of these districts that are similar to us, K-12 districts that are similar to us in size. We are the lowest spending of all of them at $13,008, with Mountain Lakes at the highest end at $21,000. So as you can tell, that's significantly, if you take that difference, which is over $7,000 times 6,200 kids, that's a heck of a lot more money in their budget that they can spend on programs than we can. And the next slide, with the money that we do, the lowest spending districts with all of those districts, we're the highest spending of all those districts in instruction, which is the way we believe it should be, that the money should go to the classroom and to the kids. And these charts show that that is what's happening, because we're almost top on that chart. We do look at ways continually to save money in other areas besides classroom and instruction. We've talked numerous times about our self-insured medical and prescription plans that have saved us money. We do coordinated transportation to out-of-district placements with other school districts so that we can share the cost of those routes and reduce costs for our district. We buy cooperatively from many different groups that enables us to get pricing for, one of the co-ops we're in has like 400 districts in it. So with the buying power of 400 districts, we're able to get better pricing than we would if we were bidding something on our own. A number of years ago, we did put solar panels on 5 schools. There were only 5 schools that were able to have solar panels. So all 5 of them, we put the panels on, and that has saved us tremendous amounts of money in our energy bills. We do numerous shared services with the town of Westfield that help save them money and us money. And we have brought back programs over the years from in-district special ed programs that we've created in our school, and that enabled us to bring kids back from some of the higher cost out-of-district placements. And so we provide the needs of the kids in accordance with their IEP, but also it enables us to save money at the same time. And the final slide, I think, or final 2 slides. And we know our students are doing amazing things. 94% of our graduates last year continued on to higher education. We have a number of national merits finalists and national merit commended students. Here we have National African American Scholar and National Hispanic Scholar students. And the final slide, 257 of our high school students were invited into the National Honor Society. We have students who have achieved perfect scores on SATs, and fine arts students recognized at all levels, and student athletes recognized at all levels. And most of these accomplishments we see year after year. These are not, as you know, one-time accomplishments. These are every year we see many, many student accomplishments. These are just a few. So our budget money is going to the students, and we do see the outcomes that we are hoping to see for how our students are achieving. And I think that's the last slide, right, Brian? So with that, does the board have any questions or comments before we'll open it up to the public, but then you guys will also hopefully adopt the final budget tonight.
I have a couple questions. Just one's a clarification, actually. The extraordinary funds, is that or extraordinary state aid? That's the CARES Act. Is that the
No. No, the CARES money is a total different. That doesn't go into our operating budget. That goes into what's called the Special Revenue Fund.
Okay.
And that's money that's designated for just expenses that the state. So we actually submit an application to the state and tell them how we intend to spend the money. And then we have to set up accounts and spend it exactly as we've told them, but that doesn't go into this part of the operating budget.
Okay. Does it help offset some of the expenses in the operating, or not necessarily?
Not necessarily. It could, depending on how we use it. But I don't think that the money that we're getting, we're probably going to be adding extra. With most of the money, I would say we're adding extra supports for students.
Okay. And then
Dana, can I just add a comment to that before you go on, Sahar? Yeah. Also, you have to keep in mind that the idea is that since that's a one-time, more than likely one-time cash infusion, you don't want to make that part of the operating budget. So the idea is that you don't want to have to count on or rely on that for future budgets.
Right. No, I was just wondering if that, because we know that there might be an injection, even if it's 1 year. Then what is the extraordinary fund? Because it seems like it's every year, and I know you have to apply for it.
So that is for special ed students that are in placements in district or out of district that have special needs that are considered extraordinary. So for in-district students, if their cost for that student exceeds $40,000, we're able to apply for extraordinary aid. And if an out-of-district student, if the cost exceeds $55,000, then we're able to apply. So that's why the application is very detailed. It's student by student to justify the expense that we're asking for from the state to show that we spent that money. And then by the time the state turns it around, we don't usually get notification of that until later. But right. we do know that we get that money every year. So we do budget for it every year, but it's, we don't really know how much.
Okay. And then related to that, and just as you may not have the detailed answer, but I just wanted to note it, that I noticed that out of district expense went from 6% to 7%, I believe, if I'm correct. Is that primarily because we just have more students? And because a whole percentage point is a lot, that's a lot of money. And so I'm curious to know why it went up, or is this just a cost of living increase essentially?
It's mostly a cost of living increase. We did not, this year, we had this current 2021 budget, we had kind of a low increase in out of district. And we're running tight, very tight. Next year, and there's really no, although our budget cap is 2%, our tax levy cap is 2%. The out-of-district schools don't have that kind of cap. So we do see tuition increases of 6, 7, 8% on tuitions. So because I don't have any cushion this year, I budgeted a little more next year so that we would be covered in case we do see increases like that. So it's not really a number of kids issue, it's more the tuition issue.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and if I could just add something, I know for people who are looking at this budget maybe for the first time or sort of appreciating some of the nuances of it, for me, the two slides that really stick out are where we look at how how much are we spending per pupil versus so many other districts that are similar to us, which shows that we're trying to do things as efficiently as we can. And then if you contrast that with the slide that followed, which talked about how much of the money that we do spend is in the classroom on the students, and that the fact that that's higher than a lot of comparable districts to us shows that we're running really kind of as leanly as we can. That sometimes people look at the total budget and it's such a large number that people assume that, you know, we have, you know, multiple layers of administrators or lots of extra support staff, you know, over at 302 Elm Street or something like that. And it's far from it. And so although it may be hard to see that from the budget, it's just something that I wanted to highlight because it's something that's really made an impact on me every year that we review the budget. Any other comments or questions? Dana, procedurally, do we now have a separate public comment on the budget? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So Brian, I guess we'll ask you to open the Q&A window and see if we have comment from the public specifically on the budget only at this time.
Okay, we have Rob Bonaccio. Rob has a question about the budget. Rob, I'll unmute you now.
Thank you. So Rob Bonaccio, 528 Forest in Westfield. My statement is more of a comment than a question, really, although I do have one. I'm thoroughly impressed by Ms. Sullivan's work on this budget. I think there's a lot of foresight here as far as anticipating funds that we may or may not have down the road. A lot of very intelligent hedging. I very much understand how big the number looks, but folks have to remember that we have a school district that is large, that's taking care of a lot of students, and I have to agree with the board president that seeing such a high percentage designated to students is really good work. So I know Ms. I mean, you know, not, but I know you had a strong support staff working with you, but I do really appreciate very much the foresight and the thoughtfulness into this. You know, I'm sure anybody can nitpick 10,000 here, 15,000 there, but I mean, that's, you know, that's like trying to kill a fly with a shotgun, right? You know, I really do think you're doing it. This was very, very well thought out. I very much appreciate what I saw as far as trying to anticipate what's not going to be here next year, in addition to what we want to do. My only question, you know, is I know there are some capital expenses that may be coming up, and I know those are frequently bonded. You know, my question is, do you anticipate, you know, any sort of larger expenses, you know, security, things of that nature, any bonds you anticipate coming up over the course of the year, or do we think that this budget kind of encompasses all of the costs that we're expending and the capital as well? But thank you very much for all the great work on that.
Dana, do you want to address the capital budget?
Sure.
Again?
So right now we do have a 5-year capital plan that we look up every year. We look at the plan, we revise it as needed, we reprioritize if needed. For the next year, our capital expenses, we anticipate using the capital reserve funds that we have. We do not anticipate going out for any bond referendums in the next year or so, or at least for the projects that we're doing in the next year. There are bigger projects like Full Day K that we've talked about in the past, and I'm sure we'll talk about again as soon as the pandemic eases up a little bit. Something like that, we may in the future request bonding, or, you know, if we do some major projects. But for the routine capital projects, if I don't know that you'd call them routine, but for lack of a better word, for the projects that are currently on our 5-year plan and that we're doing in the next year or two, the capital reserve money that we have will cover those projects.
All right. Anyone else from the public that you can see, Brian, wishing to comment on the budget?
No, I don't see any at this time.
Okay. This is an extra window for people, but there's still the standard other two options for public comment. So that being said, maybe we'll go ahead and close the Q&A window for now on the budget. And then I think, Rob, do you have the resolutions to introduce for the budget?
Yeah,
Is that right?
I'll read the two resolutions, especially since it's a public hearing. I'll actually read through both as opposed to just mentioning the numbers. So number one is approve the following resolution. Whereas on March 16th, 2021, the Westfield Board of Education adopted a tentative budget to be submitted to the Executive County Superintendent of Schools for approval, and whereas the tentative budget was approved by the Executive County Superintendent of Schools on April 1st, 2021, and whereas the tentative budget was advertised in the legal section of the Westfield Leader on April 22nd, 2021, and whereas the tentative budget was presented to the public during a public hearing on April 27th, 2021, and whereas the total amount of the budget for the general fund expenses shall be $127,184,065, of which $105,517,781 shall be raised by tax levy, and whereas the total amount of the budget for the special revenue fund expense shall be $1,942,428, of which $0 shall be raised by the tax levy, and whereas the total amount of the budget for debt service expense shall be $3,580,245,000, of which $2,666,148 shall be raised by tax levy. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Westfield Board of Education hereby adopts the 2021-2022 school year budget, and be it resolved that there should be raised for the general fund $105,517,781 for the ensuing school year, which would be 2021-2022. And finally, be it resolved that there should be raised for debt service fund $2,666,148 for the ensuing school year, again, which is 2021-2022. I'll ask for a motion for that one, and then I will. I don't know if I need to read the second one, but it's the revised travel and related expense reimbursement for 2021-2022, which is in the appropriations total of $230,510,000, and the district has spent $36,480 to date. So I'll entertain a motion.
Second.
Brandon?
Yep.
Dana, roll call.
Sahar Aziz,
Yes.
Mike Beelan,
Yes.
Brendan Galligan,
Yes.
Rob Garrison,
Yes.
Layla Morelli,
Yes.
Gretchen Olig,
Yes.
Tara Porto,
Yes.
Sonal Patel,
Yes.
Amy Root.
Yes.
Did I miss anything, Dana, or those are the two resolutions, correct?
No, you got him. Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. Dana, as always, very capable, and a great way to introduce it for people who may be following along for the first time or maybe following along yet again. So thank you for all your work.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right. It feels like we're already in the middle of the meeting, and yet it's time for announcements. I think everybody has at least one, and one lucky board member has two. So let's see. Sorry, Sahar, would you go first, please?
Sure. Congratulations to Westfield High School 11th grader Ashley Talwar, who has been accepted into the prestigious New Jersey Governor's School in the Sciences to be held virtually in July. In its 38th year, the New Jersey Governor's School in the Sciences is a 3-week program for rising high school seniors where students are immersed in intense college-level research at Drew University.
Great, thank you. Mike, do you have one to read?
Yes, on Earth Day. As part of Earth Day activities, the town of Westfield invites individuals, families, and groups to volunteer for its annual spring cleanup event on Sunday, May 2nd. Volunteers are encouraged to bring a pair of gloves and a rake. If possible, and go to either Tamaqua Park basketball courts or the Brightwood Park Prospect Street entrance between 10 a.m. and noon, where a member of the town council or the green team will coordinate the green team activities. Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, and religious organizations who need to fulfill community service requirements are welcome to participate. Please note, minors must be supervised by a parent or adult guardian. Drop-ins are certainly welcome, but advanced registration is encouraged. The registration link can be found on the Community Flyers page under Family Resources on the district website. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much. Rob, would you go next, please?
Yes. This is a reminder that the answers to many questions you may have about the district can be found on the district website, which is www.westfieldnjk12.org. In addition to a special COVID hub that is updated regularly, you will find enrollment, budget, and other key district information, curriculum by department, important family resources, and everything you need to know about upcoming and past Board of Education meetings. While we encourage the school community to follow the district Facebook and Twitter feeds, which are Facebook at Westfield Public Schools NJ and Twitter at Westfield NJK12. Both social media feeds are available on the homepage of the district website. Please visit often and use the search bar to aid in finding information. That's it.
Great, thank you. Layla, I believe you're our lucky winner with 2.
I am, and I get to talk about the shows, so that's exciting. You won't want to miss our intermediate school spring musicals performed virtually and provided as pre-recorded streaming events. On Friday, May 7th and Saturday, May 8th at 7:30 p.m., the Roosevelt Intermediate School Theater Program presents Schoolhouse Rock Live Junior, based on the award-winning animated educational series of the 1970s, featuring such favorites as Conjunction Junction, Interjections, and I'm Just a Bill. Purchase a stream pass at westfieldperformingarts.org. The following week, on Friday, May 14th and Saturday, May 15th at 7:30 p.m., the Edison School Theater Program will present Annie Jr., the story of everybody's favorite irreplaceable orphan. Stream pass tickets will be available for purchase soon, also at westfieldperformingarts.org. Okay, second announcement. For a 4th consecutive year, the Westfield Public School District has been named one of the best communities for music education in the nation for its outstanding commitment to music education. The designation is awarded by the National Association of Music Merchants, NAM, Foundation to districts that demonstrate outstanding achievement in efforts to provide music access and education to all students. Congratulations to K-12 Supervisor of Visual and Performing Arts, Tom Weber, and his team, including our music instructors, conductors, directors, and of course, our talented student musicians.
Thank you. Wow, that's a lot of great stuff. Thank you very much, Layla. Gretchen, do you have one?
I do. I have a fun one for me about our amazing student athletes at the high school. So we have 10 Westfield High School student athletes who signed letters of intent with colleges and universities, signifying recognition of the seniors' accomplishments, both academically and athletically. So we want to recognize tonight the following student athletes who will continue to compete at the college level. Emma Chulo, who's going to be cheering at Rutgers University. Allison Fernandez at Kutztown University. She's also going to cheer. Will Heflin, who's going to play football at the University of Chicago. Michaela Hobson, who's going to play softball at Roger Williams University. Sean Mayer, football, Montclair State University. Andrew Miller, football at Ithaca College. Jessica Moore, cheer at Rutgers University. Jordan Ortiz, football at the University of Pennsylvania. Dan Chakal playing football at Franklin and Marshall College. And finally, Jack Spellman, who's going to play basketball at Stevens Institute of Technology. Congratulations to all of them.
Great, thank you. Tara.
I also have a fun one. Congratulations to the cast and crew of Westfield High School's fall production of 26 Pebbles, nominated for 6 Foxy Awards in the following categories: Outstanding Production of a Virtual Play. Evan Leone, Outstanding Performance by an Actor in a Virtual Play. Matthew Meixner, Outstanding Performance by an Actor in a Virtual Play. Sophie Tannenbaum, Outstanding Performance by an Actress in a Virtual Play. Mackenzie Waddell, Outstanding Performance by an Actress in a Virtual Play. And Daniel Devlin, Outstanding Achievement in Direction. Congratulations to all of you.
That's great. Sonal.
This Friday, April 30th and Saturday, May 1st at 7:30 p.m., the Westfield High School Theater Department is pleased to present a virtual production of Godspell, a musical composed by three-time Grammy and Academy Award winner Stephen Schwartz. Due to the pandemic and the health precautions, Westfield High School Theater is sharing this pre-recorded performance as a streamed event. To buy a stream pass, visit westfieldperformingarts.org to see this amazing virtual performance made possible by our talented cast and crew.
Great, thank you. Lots of things to watch over the next couple of weekends. That's great. Brendan, you have one?
Yep. The deadline to nominate your favorite intermediate school teacher for the Optimist Club's Intermediate School Outstanding Teacher Award is Friday, May 7th. 2 intermediate school teachers, one from Edison and one from Roosevelt, will be chosen to receive the award at a Board of Education meeting in June and at the Optimist Club dinner in September. Nominations should specify ways in which the teacher has demonstrated outstanding teaching, interest in children, and a continued pursuit of professional growth. The nominee must be a full-time teacher in the Westfield Public Schools in grades 6 through 8 for a minimum of 5 years. Students, parents, and staff are encouraged to submit nomination letters to Outstanding Teacher Award Committee of the Optimist Club of Westfield, care of the Office of the Superintendent, Westfield Public Schools, 302 Elm Street, Westfield, New Jersey. Letters can also be emailed to optiaward@westfieldnjk12.org. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you very much. I have an announcement, which is that the next public meeting of the Board of Education will be held virtually on Tuesday, May 4th, beginning at 7 p.m. Instructions regarding remote access to the public meeting are on the district website at www.westfieldnjk12.org under the board tab. The complete agenda will be available this Friday, April 30th, also under the board tab on the district website. And Dr. Dolan, I believe you have a
I do have one, that's correct. And Brian, at the end of it, I'm going to ask you to show the video. So just to give you a heads up there. So in Westfield, we're fortunate that we have a parent-teacher council, which coordinates the work of the PTOs and the PTSOs for all 10 of our buildings. Right? And one of the committees under PTC is the Breaks Committee. Breaks Committee focuses on safety. And one of their traditions is each April, the crossing guards in Westfield are recognized by parents and students. And there's generally a breakfast down at Town Hall where the crossing guards are recognized for their service in keeping our students safe. So this is not a good year to have a breakfast, clearly. So instead, members of the Breaks Committee will be bringing small gifts to the crossing guards in the coming week. And they'll also get a link to a video, which is a tribute to our crossing guards. And so tonight you all get a sneak peek of the tribute to our crossing guards this year. So I feel as though I should do a quick voiceover since we don't have the sound working. Almost every one of these crossing guards talked about the reason why they do this. It's for the kids. They care about the kids and they enjoy seeing them every day. And some of our students were interviewed as well, and they had many complimentary comments for the crossing guards and how they help them out each day. And we had some parents as well. This will also be posted on our website for those who want to check it out. But we do count on our crossing guards each and every day and appreciate all their efforts. And with that, Brian, I think we're okay with the video does go on, but without the sound, I think we've gotten the sense of it. Thank you.
There you go. That's quite a teaser. Now we'll have to follow up so that we can see the whole thing. We can hear all the audio, listen for the voices of people we might recognize. I'm lucky. I have 2 crossing guards that live on my block, so I get to hear from them how things are going, questions, concerns, and I can only imagine how challenging it has been for them this year to direct traffic and direct students with masks covering their mouths. So I bet there's a lot of water drinking at the end of their shifts. But we are so appreciative for their commitment and for what they do for the district. Absolutely. So we'll watch for that. All right. So now we're at the first official point of the meeting where we would recognize the public for comments on agenda items only. So if anybody wanted to say anything about the budget but missed their opportunity, you could say it now, or if there's anything else on the agenda that people would like to comment on. Brian will tell people when their microphones are unmuted, and then if you could just say your name and address for the record, please. You seeing anyone yet, Brian? No? Okay. And as I said, there will be a third option later in the meeting for anyone who didn't get a chance to type their name in yet. I'll give it another 5 seconds or so just to see. Nope, not seeing anyone. Are you, Brian? Okay. Let's go ahead and move along. Unfortunately, it's going to take me a little bit longer to read the minutes that I need you all to approve because there have been so many of them. Right, Brian, are we ready to move along? Okay, all right.
You had so like somebody typed in the chat, maybe just acknowledge that they can speak later on that, or?
Yes, someone has typed in the words Superintendent Search, which is not an agenda item for tonight. So there'll be another portion in the meeting where we'll take comments on anything that's not officially an agenda item. Okay. All right. All right. I would like the board to approve the following minutes, and maybe I could just make a distinction. Board meeting is a regularly scheduled board meeting. A private board meeting is the private section of a regularly scheduled board meeting. A special board meeting is one that wasn't originally scheduled, and a special private board meeting is the private session of that specially called board meeting. So having prefaced all of that, I'd like the board to approve the minutes of the board meeting of April 6th, 2021, and the private board meeting April 6th, 2021, the special board meeting on April 7th, 2021, and special private board meeting April 7th, 2021, the special board meeting April 8th, 2021, and special private board meeting April 8th, 2021, the special board meeting April 10th, 2021, and special private board meeting April 10th, 2021, the special board meeting on April 12th, 2021, and special private board meeting April 12th, 2021, and sorry, was I up to the 12th? Special board meeting April 13th, 2021, and special private board meeting April 13th, 2021, special board meeting April 14th, 2021, and special private board meeting April 14th, 2021. May I have a second? Layla.
Second.
All right. All in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Aye. Any abstentions?
Yeah, I did not attend any of the special board meetings.
Okay.
I'm the slacker. Okay.
No, you were not allowed to join us. We would have loved to have had you. So the board meeting on April 6th, and that one you can vote yes on. Yes. Okay. All right. Clear as mud, Dana? Got that?
Got it.
Got it. All right. Terrific. All right. I would like the board to consider personnel items 1 through 23. Could I have a second? Rob,
Second.
thanks. Saw your hand first. Great. Thank you. I believe we have some items of note for Dr. Dolan to talk about.
We do. Tonight, I have 4 retirements to announce, and I also have a recommendation to make that is on the agenda. So first, the 4 retirements. For the last 13 years, Valerie Hamilton has been a respected member of the Westfield High School staff in her role as a special education teacher. Valerie has worked with 9th through 12th graders, deepening their skills in language arts and successfully embedding social and emotional learning into her lessons. With her guidance, students find meaningful life lessons in the text they read, and they expand their writing skills as a powerful way to express themselves. Terry Pastor. Terry Pastor has been a social worker on the child study teams at both middle schools and at Tamaulipas for the last 20 years. She has attained the respect of both staff and parents through her strong case management, interviewing, and assessment skills, as well as her compassionate understanding of her students. Terry has also stepped in to become the coordinator of her child study team when a colleague was on a maternity leave. And I think anyone who knows Terry thinks of that word compassionate first. In 1999, Mr. Joseph Malango was hired as the principal of Washington School first, and then transitioned to leading Wilson School. He has further given of his time and skills as the HIB coordinator, as the coordinator of elementary principals, and as a member of numerous district committees over the years. Joe cares deeply about the students entrusted to him and makes their needs a priority, setting a powerful example for the staff in his building. His belief in the pillars of character has created an environment at Wilson of kindness and generosity. For 36 years, Carol Stavitsky has been a nurse at Westfield High School. And in recent years, she has added the title of District Coordinator of Nurses to her responsibilities. A deeply respected and trusted leader, Carol has always been known to go above and beyond, but never more so than in the last 13 months as we have lived with the pandemic. Her nonstop responsibilities, and I do mean nonstop, have included constant contact with the district nurses and administrators, and she's created a strong partnership with the health officials of our region. Carol never asks anyone to do anything she wouldn't do, and I can vouch personally to tell you, every holiday this year, Carol has been working and doing contact tracing and checking on rumors of positive cases. We would not have done as well as we have done this year without Carol Stavitsky, and I thank her, and I thank all of our retirees this week. And I would also like to highlight a recommendation that's on the agenda. So Mary McCabe has been a teacher at Franklin School for 18 years. And as a teacher, she was well known as a teacher, very caring, very knowledgeable, and she also became a leader in the school. She was a literacy coach. She also worked as a liaison, and she's known for that for many years. But last year, during the lockdown, we were looking for an interim assistant principal. We knew at that point we couldn't do a full-fledged open search because we were literally in lockdown. Mary was willing to step forward and took the position of interim assistant principal. And let me just say, she began work immediately once she was given that position. Over the summer, she worked tirelessly with Dr. Duncan, the principal of Franklin School, making schedules, developing instructional frameworks for the new hybrid learning plan. Dr. Duncan and Mrs. McCabe became quite a good team, working hand in hand to prepare also for all the safety measures that were needed to open schools in September. They then created an extensive presentation to explain all of this to both Franklin families and teachers, to the whole community. So Mary has been working hard all year, but in Westfield, we make it really clear, if you're in an interim position, you're in an interim position. And if you want to go for the full position, that's still an open process, and everybody has to earn their spot there. We're glad to know how they work, but we want to make sure we have the best person in the position. So Dr. Duncan and Mrs. Ball conducted quite a thorough interview process. There was a committee that was involved. There was definitely different steps. I also met with Mrs. McCabe, And both Dr. Duncan and I are very happy to recommend Mary McCabe as the assistant principal for Franklin School. And as Dr. Duncan put it, it is with great confidence that I recommend Mary McCabe to be the next assistant principal of Franklin School. So I make that presentation to the board. And after the board votes on personnel, we do have Mary with us tonight, so she may be able to say a few words after the vote.
All right.
If I may, Amy, I just want to comment, as I normally do, if there's something that retirees that have been personal for me. So Mrs. Savitsky, I really didn't get to know all that well until the pandemic and being on the Restart Committee. And I've just been, amazed at the work that she's done and what she's been able to coordinate with the nurses throughout the district and what she's done for the town as a whole. So definitely want to commend her and wish her all the best. And then Mr. Malanga, I've got to know Mr. Malanga very, very well, especially since Maya's been at Wilson School the past 5 years. And I've been on the PTO for, I think, most of those years, maybe at least 4 of those 5 years. So I've been in many a meeting, and whether volunteering or not, I've seen him quite a bit. And I'll miss some of the conversations that we've had, and even going back and talking about the Bloomfield days for both of us. So I do want to wish him the best as well, and thank him for all that he's done for Wilson School and for the district as a whole.
If I could also say something, I got to know Ms. Pastor this year, and I've worked with a lot of child study team members, both professionally and personally, and she is tops. And I'm so sorry that she's leaving and that we only got to work with her for a year, because she is totally responsive, totally engaged, and absolutely caring. So she has been a pleasure to get to know, and I wish her the best of luck.
Amy, I'd like to tag team on. It certainly echo everything that Rob and Layla said. In particular, though, with Terry Pastor, I've been fortunate enough to just personally work with her in connection with my kids, and we are going to miss her. She's fantastic, and so I just want to thank her for everything that she's done for kids in this district. And of course, we'll miss Mr. Malanga and Mr. Skavitsky. Mary, I know you've been around for a while, and we haven't officially voted yet, but welcome to the formally to the administrative team. And look forward to working with you.
Got it. Thanks. I would just like to add a note of thanks to Mr. Malanga as well. We were already at Wilson School when he joined as principal there, and I got to know him very well as president of the Wilson PTO when I was there. He still to this day will tell anyone who will hold still that he is responsible for my being on the Board of Education, that he gave me the idea and prompted me to. So I hope that's a good thing. But yeah, we will miss him. He's been a staple there at Wilson for quite a long time. So we wish him all the best in his retirement. Any other comments? Okay. Should we do roll call, Dana?
Sure. Sahara Aziz.
Yes.
Mike Beelan.
Yes.
Brendan Galligan.
Yes.
Rob Garrison.
Yes.
Layla Morelli.
Yes.
Gretchen Oleg.
Yes.
Tara Porto.
Yes.
Sonal Patel.
Yes.
Amy Root.
Yes. Thank you. All right. Well, welcome, Mary. Do you have a few words you'd like to say? We'd love to hear from you.
Sure. Thank you so much, Dr. Dolan, for your kind words and your support. And thank you, board members, for your encouragement and your commitment to educating the children of Westfield. As a graduate of Westfield High School and a mother of 2 children in the Westfield School District, I have been absolutely delighted to serve as a teacher for many years at Franklin School. And this school year, I completely enjoyed my role as interim assistant principal. And I am so excited and so honored to continue in this position moving forward. The Westfield School District is an exceptional community to be a part of, and I am just so proud to be the official Franklin School Assistant Principal. We have learned so much from this extraordinary school year, and I believe that we will be stronger because of it. I really look forward to continuing my work with Dr. Duncan and the teachers, students, and families of Franklin School, And I just so appreciate everyone's encouragement and support. Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to see all of the achievements and accomplishments that are part of this wonderful school district. Thank you.
All right, terrific. We're glad you could join us. Welcome to the team, officially. All right, let's see, moving along, facilities, Mike Beelan.
Oh, we haven't had a meeting since we last met earlier in the month. We'll have to put a new one on the schedule when it's appropriate. That's all. That's the update. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Long-range planning, Gretchen.
Yes, so we had a meeting last Friday. I circulated notes yesterday. I'll just briefly summarize my notes. So we spent the bulk of the hour together, just sort of revisiting or talking about the return to school. And we chunked it in a couple of different categories. So we talked about what the end of this year is going to look like, in particular for graduation and end of year ceremonies. So there was a lot of conversation initially about the high school seniors. And at that point, it looked like, and I believe it still does, they're going to be able to graduate in an in-person ceremony at Kaler with likely 2 guests in attendance. And then the Edison and Roosevelt end of year moving up ceremonies were also trying to be planned at Kaler so that as many people could participate as possible. I believe that the elementary schools aren't going to be able to use Kaler. It's just booked with so many scheduling conflicts, but there were a lot of the elementary school principals were planning outdoor events at their home schools, and they're going to be making individual announcements about what that looks like. We then sort of talked about what in-person opportunities are going to look like for our students for the balance of the 2021 school year. And the initial priority that the administration was working on, according to Dr. Dolan, was getting our half-day kindergarten sessions in for the full half day. And I think that may have been discussed at the restart committee, and hopefully an announcement will come on that point soon. At the elementary level, the principals were really working hard with staff to try and figure out how to accommodate lunch for students so that we could have those students back for more in-person opportunities. They're talking about staggered lunch outdoors, what it looks like if there's bad weather. And we did just talk briefly about the fact that parents have been so generous in offering to assist, but the logistics of having outsiders in and out of the school and the monitoring that sort of accompanies that idea was too difficult to make it a realistic option. So the principals are actively working on trying to make sure that the existing staff can monitor lunch so that those kids can be back. And then one of the things that I thought was interesting was Dr. Dolan, we talked about how if you even spend a brief amount of time on social media, you will see that there are many claims that we are the only district who's not back, all day, every day. And I know that Dr. Dolan spends a lot of time talking to superintendents across the district. And so she shared with us that, just recently there had been sort of an informal, I think it was an informal, but a survey of what percentage of students are actually back and how that compares to us. And she found out that we are actually among the highest in terms of the percentage of our students who are back. So for instance, Hoboken, where they have full day in person and is sort of a case study that you see a lot of, they only have 35% of their students who have opted to attend in-person classes, while our numbers are well in the 90% or higher. So, that coupled with our older buildings and space and lack of cafeterias in our elementary schools certainly makes our job a little bit harder, but everyone is working, continuing to work towards getting more in-person learning for our kids. And then we touched just briefly on September 2021. I think that the administration is, and I don't mean to speak for them, but my impression is that they're just sort of so focused on end of year now, and also the state is just now sort of gearing up to provide some guidance about what next year will look like and to solicit opinions and requests from superintendents and districts about what they might need for support from the Department of Ed. And so there's going to be a lot more forthcoming on that. I'll just reiterate, it's my understanding that it is the administration's intention that we will, that all students will be back full day in-person learning come September 2021. That's my rather lengthy report. I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone has anything, and I'm sure Dr. Dolan, if I missed anything, please sort of fill in the blanks.
I just would like to add one thing. The next meeting of the Restart Committee is this Thursday.
And I don't know if, I know that very soon after we met, the governor did have some sort of announcement about in-person gatherings. That may be prom related but it may also be graduation related. So I don't know if there's anything there worth adding now.
Right. I think that was just yesterday. The governor increased the number of people who can gather both indoors in certain circumstances, and he specifically called out prom as well as outdoors. So yes, that's good news. As the numbers increase, that means we can do more. So discussion about prom continues at the high school. We're definitely looking to have as many students as possible be able to participate. And the governor also mentioned that he fully anticipates increasing those numbers. I heard him say by Memorial Day. So that's encouraging as well. So we plan with the current information we have, and then as it expands, then we can adapt the plans as well. But it's good news to be able to include more people.
There's been a lot of discussion online that I've been reading about the prom, and now that the outdoor CDC is recommending no masks, and I'm going by the governor's statement about now allowing dancing outside, and I'm seeing mixed comments, and I don't really know what it means as far as, are students going to be able to dance at the prom or not, and whether it's indoors or people are suggesting outdoors given the updated guidance. What's the direction that because people have questions, and I think want a straight answer on how we're going to answer that.
Sure. So the new guidance came out yesterday, so I don't think I have the definitive answer. It is true that the governor did announce increased numbers outside and also inside. And I believe the facility that the high school uses could probably accommodate either. So that's being worked on right now. Okay. Two confusing things, I think, at least I thought they were confusing. It was said that people can now dance, but you have to dance and keep social distance. Now, I'm sure that's possible, but I'm picturing 450 seniors who are graduating, keeping social distance while dancing. And although they are perfect young people, I'm not sure how that works, keeping 6 feet while dancing, but maybe it's possible. But that was what was said yesterday, that yes, people can dance, but they should keep social distance.
Yeah, I think the dancing is limited to outside because it's not really safe inside. So that's the recommendation was outside, and I don't know what the distance is outside versus inside.
Yeah. Like the outdoor guidance from the CDC only changed for people that are vaccinated. So that doesn't apply to most of our students.
Right. So that's the other confusing thing. That was today's change by the CDC, which is related to, but different than yesterday's guidance. And yesterday's guidance did say if there is dancing, that there should still be masks. So it is confusing. We'll make sure whatever the current rules are, that they will be spelled out so that the students can understand it.
Thank you.
I just want to make one comment. A lot of you might know this, but now a lot of the students at the high school, my understanding is there are more students, I wouldn't say a lot, that are now able to get vaccinated if they're 16 or over, which includes, I believe, probably all seniors, I believe are 16 or over. So I don't know if that will affect things, but I know my daughter and her friends are getting vaccinated and eager to do so.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Our students at the high school have been eager to do so, and that's a wonderful thing. It's a great thing. And you're right, it'll also have an impact on what we can do at the end of the year.
And not to push one organization, but Atlantic Healthcare has plenty of appointments available, and you can go right in Clark down Central Avenue. what used to be the bowling alley, and then Valley Fitness is now an Atlantic Health Center. And you always see appointments available, so you can really get an appointment within a day.
You know what, I'll jump on that too. I know maybe it's not appropriate, but I'll say it anyway. So the ShopRite Clark is walk-in tomorrow, Thursday, and Friday. So no appointments necessary. I believe it's 10 to 4, but you'd have to check the time. But it is, as long as the vaccines are available, it's walk-in tomorrow, Thursday, and Friday.
I think if we're giving vaccine information, we can do that. I think that's a good thing. The more people who get out there, and it's much easier now. So if it was hard for you earlier, now is the time to jump on it because the appointments are open.
I don't have anything further, Amy. I assume that the Long Range Planning Committee will meet at least once more for the end of the school year, but I don't have a date at this point. Although it does occur to me, maybe the prom theme could be Footloose, because they couldn't really dance in Footloose either. I don't think my own senior would really appreciate that, but I can float the idea.
Well, it was interesting. I thought I saw something that said that private organizations that have dance floors might be able to allow dancing, but public bars and restaurants would not, because they thought that that would allow for sort of better control and ability to theoretically contact trace, I guess, if they needed to, if it was a private event. So maybe there's hope for our seniors who want to dance at prom. To be continued, right? Okay, thank you. All right, moving along, policies. Brendan?
Yep. I ask the board to approve policy item number 1. Can I have a second? Thank you, Sonal. This is to approve this 2021-2022 student activity fee. This is a policy that we've reviewed every year since we put it in place, and we've not made any changes to the student activity fee in the 10 years that we've had it, nor do we plan to this upcoming year. So this is preserving the same rates and rules that have been in effect for 10 or 11 years at this point. Any questions on that? All right. Dana?
Sahar Aziz,
Yes.
Mike Beelan,
Yes.
Brendan Galligan,
Yes.
Rob Garrison,
Yes.
Layla Morelli,
Yes.
Gretchen Oleg,
Yes.
Tara Porto,
Yes.
Sonal Patel,
Yes.
Amy Root.
Yes.
All right. At the last board meeting, there was a robust discussion regarding some of our policies, and a request from Tara to review some of those policies. Tara and I spoke this morning. She gave me some suggestions for proposed changes. We talked about how it would all work, and I'll bring those those suggestions to the policies committee at our next meeting, which is scheduled for May 11th at 6 p.m. And that's it.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. Moving on to curriculum, instruction, and programs, which is normally my section. But before we move to curriculum items, we have a guest presenter, not so much a guest, Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum, Instruction, and Programs, Paul Pinero, has some material to review with us. Are you ready for that, Paul?
Sure am. Hi, everybody. Good evening. Brian's going to just put up a PowerPoint that I can help walk through what we've been up to with regard to monitoring student progress. Some introductory comments before we start going through the slides would be, so the state did require us to do some data collection on how students have been doing. This was part actually of their waiver request of the federal government so that we wouldn't have to do standardized testing this spring. So in case we're not all on the same page with that, that's a great blessing for us, because we are going to be able to recoup a lot of instructional time by not having to devote time to the standardized testing, which probably would yield very data that would be not as useful under the current circumstances. So I think it was responsible of the state to ask districts to do some kind of data collection to get a sense of where our students are at. And that was a good exercise for us. One caveat about that, though, is, so we monitor progress on a regular basis, whether there is a pandemic or not. but we were required to kind of bucket the information into categories of at, below, or above grade level. So we don't always speak in terms of that. Typically at the elementary level, when we get towards the end of the year, we'll do end of year assessments that will then talk about, say, reading levels at grade level. So we do have a sense of reading levels at grade level, but we don't usually speak in global terms that way. So we did need to kind of push into these buckets and, you know, with the data that we had, so that we could then tell the state we have X percentage of students that are below and so forth. So that's what you're going to see tonight. So Brian has moved on to the next slide, which just reinforces what I was saying about how, you know, looking for where students are, where they have readiness and where they might need some reteaching, reinforcement isn't new to us. We're typically looking for individual student progress, but also to monitor if we're delivering the instruction as well as we can, and also if the curriculum is effective. So it's an ongoing process, and our curriculum instruction and programs committee of the board hears us speak quite often about the documents that they review with us and then bring to the full board, that those documents are really useful for us to gauge you know, where we're at individually and on a more global basis. So the next slide, Brian. Yeah, so these are traditional means that we all have grown up with. I thought it would just be worthwhile to put those down quickly. Unit and benchmark assessments, test quizzes, homework, report cards. These are traditional means. Next, yeah. And what we learned from those kinds of assessment is pretty much what I was talking about: individual progress as well as group progress. And then also the idea that we can be consistent across schools and grade levels if we're assessing and sharing that departmentally and at a grade level, so that we can compare notes as to where, if there are certain gaps, maybe in one grade level in one school but not another, then we have those conversations and then we reinforce what could be reinforced and retaught. Next slide. So before pandemic, these are the kinds of formative assessments that we would do. Formative meaning sort of on the fly, things that you do that aren't necessarily cumulative or summative. So these are non-pandemic formative assessment approaches that we continue to use during the pandemic. Questioning for understanding in real time. Exit tickets before a class is over. We call it exit tickets because in the real, you know, in the real world, when students are, the class is winding down, they'll write something down to show their understanding of what happened during that lesson, and they'll leave it off with the teacher who will then review it. We you know, did that in hard copy, and then over the pandemic, we were able to sort of modify that and do it virtually. Journal responses, homework. The next slide just touches on a couple of formative assessment practices that we became pretty skilled at using because we had to virtually and then in the hybrid setting. These included recorded video responses, and that's a really good thing for students to become comfortable with. Chat box responses, we're all becoming more and more adroit with that, even here at our meetings. Class discussions, we're still being able to take place virtually, and observing student discussions in breakout rooms. So same thing as when teachers would circulate a classroom and sort of eavesdrop on different small groups, they were still able to do that once they mastered breakout rooms. And that was a big step for us early in this school year to be able to do that. And then a whole host of shared type documents, Google's Docs, Google Forms, Pear Deck, Nearpod. This is where teachers can provide feedback within a document. That's become something we'll carry over into non-pandemic times as well. So then the next slide references just some summative assessment practices that, again, we're all familiar with: tests, essays, projects, sometimes a combination of these, portfolio types. The next slide references how there are some new summative assessment strategies that we used during the pandemic. So projects were more frequently asked to integrate some kinds of digital resources. We were doing that quite a bit before the pandemic. So that was an easy transition to start doing it more regularly. Multimedia tools in order to communicate, present student understanding. So all different kinds of ways that students, lots of different resources for doing that. Something that, again, teachers were doing quite a bit of, but now I think it will stay with us and provide feedback in a more real-time basis or more quickly for teachers. They've become so comfortable and familiar with embedding annotations and comments for students into the documents. And in some ways they have conversations, you know, the way those of us who use Google Docs and share them, you can have conversations, you know, in the sidebar about the, in the case of students' essays, and that's become quite normal. I think the next slide starts to talk about, the data collection. So first we'll start with the K through 5. I'm showing you the report card there. That's the standards-based report card. So the timing was pretty good in that the standards-based report card has a series for each content area of key indicators that are related to the standards, and they're very skill-based. So, you know, if one of them references phonemic awareness or something with regard to math fact fluency, then the teachers are monitoring over the course of the 3 trimesters for K-5 how students progress. Something to keep in mind when we move toward looking at the percentages in the data in the coming slides is that by nature of tracking students in a standards-based report card, it is expected that you're going to receive, okay, next slide will show this. So we use at the K-5 level for standards-based report cards, EAPN. So E would mean exceeding benchmarks. So the point I was leading towards is students aren't necessarily expected, even if they're, you know, at or above grade level typically, they're not necessarily expected to consistently extend key concepts and skills beyond the benchmarks until the end of the year. So what you're going to see tonight in all cases is the snapshot the state asked for was up through March. So there's still a third of the year left. So there's some of that to keep in mind when it comes to the standards-based report card. So at any rate, we're going to stay with this slide just another moment. What you see there is it's our own in-district internal means for taking the 4 indicators, EAPN, and making it 3. So there's something arbitrary about that, but we did spend a great deal of time and a lot of hours debating how we might create a cutoff that would give us a sense of what would be at above or below grade level. And so we came up with the, you know, less than 1.5. So on a scale of 1 to, if you had 1 through 3, you would then be able to sort of capture the EAPN in a numerical way. So those were cutoffs. You know, they're, as I said, you know, we had to make them up internally. There's no way that the state could provide us with guidance on how to turn EAPN into at, below, or above. But, you know, we came up with data that we think is useful for now. So we can go on to the next slide, Brian.
Paul, if I could ask real quick.
Sure.
It looked like the at grade level and above grade level were overlapping.
Yeah,
numbers.
so if we, right. Well, one is greater than 1.5 and one is then greater than 2.0.
Right, so there's some overlap in those cohorts. Because it's not 1.5 to 2.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So next, Brian. Yeah, so this is just John Smith, a random, you know, John Smith student, not really one of ours. And what you see here is a close-up of an ELA of the report card, the ELA and the report card. So you see the skills as demonstrates phonological awareness, applies principles of phonics to decode, reads with fluency. And then to the right, you see marking period 1, marking period 2, And that's sort of where I was saying that by marking period 3, you would start to see more ease, or you'd see movement upward typically, as students become more consistent in their ability to do those skills. Okay, so next slide. Okay, so this is math trimester 2. So it's a snapshot of what would have been from January through March, from December, March, yes. And when we applied that cutoff system, we came up with these percentages. I think it's a little harder to make, to differentiate between at grade level and above grade level. But I think the percentage of below grade level is pretty close to what we might normally see, but maybe bumped up a little bit. Kindergarten, for example, is an area that we might expect we'll need to work with students. We're really happy that we're going to see more class time for the remainder of the school year for students, and we think that will help a good deal. Those numbers aren't staggering relative to where we might be on any given school year, though, for trimester 2. And then again, grade level, above grade level, that's where we'd like to see combined as many students as possible. And yes, so that's math. And the next slide will give us ELA. So same kind of deal here, same drill. Kindergarten through 5, below, at, and above grade level. And these are the percentages for that. And certainly already we've shared some of this data with principals and given them the same caveat that it's a little arbitrary and we're squeezing 4 indicators into 3. But we've started, these percentages do reflect students. So we're going to start carefully monitoring and creating rosters for principals to take close looks and see if there's, if there are some students that we can start to provide supplemental resources or look at doing things for the summer or any kind of intervention that we might do into next year. So that's what we're doing with the data for now. We wouldn't conclusively suggest that the students reflected in these numbers are required or even recommended at this point to receive interventions because we still have to wait for what we are able to do for the rest of the year. And we also do have a lot of faith in our end of the year assessments, which are much more geared toward finding out who might be below grade level. So I guess below grade level is something we are comfortable with making distinctions of the other 2, maybe not so much in K through 5, because it's just not part of what we normally do. Okay, next one. There's science. Yeah, I guess the numbers are reflective of what teachers have been able to accomplish with regard to the science instruction. And I think the next slide might be moving us on to 6 through 12. So in 6 through 12, Brian, I think go to the next slide now too. Yeah, so it's a little different. We don't have standards-based report cards, which on one hand are very beneficial for us to zero in on specific standards. It was just harder to quantify. Grades 6 through 12, by taking some key unit and cumulative assessments, essays, quizzes, and projects, ones that really reflect the standards and the skills that are expected, that our students are expected to master. This was sort of easier to quantify. So for the most part, before going on to the actual percentages, I'll kind of keep it simple and say that if you were, it was kind of along the lines of A would be above grade level, B at, and C at, and so forth, unless it was an AP or honors class. And then we considered, say, a B plus and above grade level, because just by nature of the rigor of the class, those students are already. And one more caveat before moving on is just that this idea of grade level is a little tricky because our expectations are always above grade level. So if in some ways we're also doing this dance of 30%, 33 and a third percent, 33 and a third, well. So the grade level language is a little bit hard to apply, I guess is what I'm saying. So the next slide is, yeah, there you go. So there's ELA 6 through 8. And there's the percentages again. Those are like below grade level. That seems along the lines of what we might be seeing this time of year. And then acting on it. And then you see your percentage at and above. Next slide. Okay, so that's 9 and 10 for ELA. The state was asking for 9 and 10 only. Okay, there's math 6 through 8. And these numbers, when I ask people what they mean, you know, as far as what we typically see from year to year, they're sort of a, yeah, that makes sense kind of reaction. That we would have those percentages of students that might need a little bit of extra support between now and the end of a school year. Okay, and the next one, high school first semester math. So these are the major courses that we were asked to supply these percentages for by the state. So Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2 is usually what they test in the state. So these are the percentages for the below, above, and at grade level for math. And then we have some for science, 6 through 8. Those numbers look really low for below grade level, but it's just, you know, what reflects the key assignments that we had. And then there's typically high school. We have some bio in middle school as well, but so biochem, physics, and earth sciences. Okay, so here's our plan for addressing learning gaps. This is changing for the most part almost day to day because of funding. Dana was talking a little bit about other sources of funds that we'll receive because of the pandemic, and they're directly meant to help us with accelerating learning, as well as some other areas, including mental health and just, of course, some other operational fund resources that we might need. So as an example for K-5, as far as addressing learning gaps, this is a table that our K-5 supervisor put together. And just as one example, demonstrating phonological awareness back in, say, March or middle of February, we had 16 students in a particular school that were receiving a P by teachers. So that's something immediately that went into, planning to try to counteract that. So this particular supervisor just put out yesterday some guidance to all teachers based on this information. So they're like 2-page documents for each teacher, K through 2 and then 3 through 5, that walks them through what she found looking through these skills based on the report card data. Okay. And then 6 through 12, the teachers and supervisors, they'll review student performance on benchmark assignments. So that's what I was talking about a little bit earlier, the key assessments, and try to determine what, as departments, they can look into doing to reinforce and reteach where necessary. Again, this is done whole department, but we are also trying to, so as skill-based and globally, but we're still also identifying individual teachers, individual students. So teachers are helping do that so that we can provide supports. Okay. All grade levels after the end of the school year. So those kinds of interventions that I just referenced were between now and the end of the school year. The plan for after the end of the school year is to identify students, to determine the interest level of parents and students for in-person summer school. I'll talk about summer in just a moment, come back to it. And also we would then recruit some teachers to provide in-person summer school instruction. And then of course we'd have to plan the logistics for doing all that. That's the key, to have more programs. We already have a lot of things going on typically in the summer. So we would be looking to do other kinds of reinforcement and intervention supports in the summer as well. So that'll be new for us. Dana and I are working on the funds that we're receiving and what we can do with those. With regard to summer, I'll say that our current thinking and even preliminary budgeting is looking at, so next year academically providing interventions that are embedded into the school day and into the school year versus summer, where, to be perfectly fair and honest, I don't know that we would want to take these students who've been through what they've been through and then hammer them with skill and drill over the summer. So what we do come up with in the summer will be geared towards students maybe who were disconnected, disaffected, and really struggled, and try to provide them with activities that might be theme-based, a little bit of fun, and just designed to rebuild their confidence in doing some schoolwork, but also in a context that won't be as daunting as maybe what they've been experiencing. So if we have students that maybe are disaffected and discouraged, we want to bring them in for some in-person activity for a couple of weeks, 3 hours a day. That's what we're tossing around now, and we'll have to nail it down pretty quickly. But depending on how parents feel about bringing students in over the summer, and of course that's based on what the program will sound like to them, we would put together what we could and try to just reconnect those students and make them feel confident again in coming back to school in September, and then really provide supports in September throughout the rest of the school year, playing catch up where necessary. That might be the last slide. Nope, it's not. Oh, right. So I just referenced that. So going into next year, providing some supports such as expanding our basic skills program, more staffing for academic labs at the higher grade levels, interventionists. We're looking at putting math and ELA interventionists at the middle school level, and that would provide us, I think, with more focused academic kind of data collections, as opposed to in the summer where, as I was saying, we're trying to rebuild some stamina and some confidence. But during the school year, I think we drill down into the nitty-gritty a little bit more when it comes to the academic skills and supporting through those. So I think that might be the last slide. Okay. So yeah, I just would reiterate, and then anything any board members would like to share, but reiterate that the end of year, especially at the elementary level, assessments that we do every year, those are the assessments that really drive our ability to identify students for those for programs of intervention. And we still expect we will do the same this year. And we think that we know that will be very clear data, whereas right now it's kind of based on something that we had to provide for the state, but seems in line with what we would have expected had we had some other kinds of mid-year to 2/3 of the year assessments that were designed to do what this was doing.
I ask a couple follow-ups?
Sure.
Thank you. That was so informative, and I know you all have been doing a lot of work behind the scenes. I just had a couple questions, and again, because we have people on, although I know we'll have another open session, I think we have 56 people online. But the first one is, to what extent will whether it's the teachers or the administrators, be contacting the students or in communication, not with the students, excuse me, with the parents of the students that are found to be below grade level, just to make sure that they're aware of whether it's something that needs an intervention, maybe over the summer, maybe in the beginning of the year, because I think we all share the concern that we already know that there's the summer regression. That's just normal, right? And the loss that just comes with 3 months of not being in school, and then adding whatever wasn't able to be, whatever's below grade level as a result of various factors, and starting that school year that way. And that the concern is, will that deficit run into can it be addressed earlier rather than later so that you don't have students who eventually kind of end up more permanently in below grade level or barely at grade level. So I'm just curious to know what the communication plan is, at least with individual parents. So that's one question.
Right.
And then the second is just about fifth graders and eighth graders, especially fifth graders. And I'm a bit biased because I have a fifth grader. And so that transition between, fifth grade, where you're in an elementary school, it's a small environment, you've got full day, one teacher, full day, a lot easier, I think, to do those interventions. Whereas once you go into middle school, or if you're transitioning from eighth grade to high school, how do you all envision those interventions in that context? And again, I'm just asking because I suspect other parents might have those questions.
Sure.
With the ultimate concern that it's like, how do we make up for that, for those, especially those below grade level students?
I'll work backwards. So to your first one, transition, absolutely. Transition years are tricky, and they're tricky all the time. So we do have a program that we call Jump Start for transitioning into sixth grade from fifth grade for students who might need that kind of support, just to become acclimated and comfortable in the environment more than anything. So it's kind of a fun experience, but we've put funds aside to expand that. And we expect that there would be more students that would benefit from participating in Jumpstart this year. So that's the first part. And the second part, your first part was the communication with parents. So I would say informally what teachers are doing now is, again, kind of typical. If a student is struggling, teachers and supervisors tell me that they're continuing to do outreach as they normally would, if the students were in school and might be struggling a little bit in how they can be supported at home. But the end of the year, and we've added a couple other, at least for ELA, at the elementary level, we have a couple of programs that are good for reading, identifying reading abilities. So in addition to our typical end of year reading assessments, we have some online programs. Literally is one, and that will help us really pinpoint. So we'll take those rosters, we'll share them with teachers and parents, with teachers and principals, and then come up with a roster of students that we think is worth reaching out to parents to discuss it with. It's possible even that there might not be someone on an intervention list for some reason or other that a teacher might think should be. Maybe they were sort of disconnected and they were under the radar as far as their ability levels were concerned or how they were performing, but there could be something else a teacher sees there that might suggest that they need some kind of reconnecting to schools and what have you. So we'll be reaching out more formally, I guess, is my answer there, towards the end of the year once we've collected more data, and that would be as late as late May, early June. But when it comes to putting something together for the summer, we may need to do some outreach to parents just to get a sense of whether or not they would, prior to that, be open to bringing kids back in the summer for in-person. So those are the tricky variables for me. I mean, it's unprecedented kind of stuff we're going through, but also it's hard to know what people have a tolerance for these days and what they have an appetite for. I could see saying, I know my student might have struggled, but they need this time off. So anything that we do wouldn't be hyper intense, and it wouldn't be all summer. Not like the way some of us might think about summer school when we were growing up, where you kind of went to summer school for 6 weeks and tried to learn everything that you didn't learn. We're not really thinking that's going to be good for the younger ones in particular.
Thanks.
Sure.
Well, that Jumpstart only apply to fifth to sixth grade, because there might be some kids that have been remote the whole year that are in sixth grade now, and they might need that adjustment even though they're going into seventh grade, because it's still going to be a new experience for them.
Well, okay. I see your point, Mike. Well, applying some funds, I was going to say, yeah, but they've already been at school, but you're right, some haven't. So very good point. And we're putting more funds towards Jumpstart to cast that wider net. So that is absolutely something I will speak to the supervisor about tomorrow.
Just about Jumpstart, none of the sixth graders this year were able to participate because of the COVID restrictions at the time. And while I do think that many of them have been in school, I would be curious to see what is covered that hasn't been introduced to them, like use of lockers and all of that. If they're going to include that in Jumpstart, then maybe the sixth graders who would be recommended could come in for a portion for that as well.
And yes, we can definitely have those conversations.
Thanks, Paul.
In the way that the high school has kind of offered a mini orientation, right, for students who might be able to come back in person for the end of the school year, who are freshmen who've never physically been in the building yet, right? It would almost be kind of a different version of that kind of orientation, right?
Almost a 10th grade orientation.
Right.
For high school kids. We might want to look at expanding out like transition project and that kind of stuff for kids that weren't obviously able to partake last year.
I'm just taking notes. More?
No, again, just to recap, so you know the assessment data that you've shown us is sort of through the springtime, and you expect that there will be some shifting as students reinforce concepts, as teachers get to spend more time with most students between now and the end of the school year, right? There may be changes there as kids get more time and skills get reinforced.
Right. I mean, I'll be more comfortable with that data towards the end of the year than I am with this data, because again, it feels a little arbitrary to me. I feel that whatever this data reflects is probably being picked up well at the school levels already, based on what teachers are seeing through individual students. So if I had to point at one thing that was valuable for the state upload, I think the skill sets that sort of jumped out at us as being deficient globally, I think that's kind of reliable and that's very useful. The individual students, it's a little trickier with the kind of data that we collected to pinpoint what kids might need certain interventions. And I think that teacher observance and working with students daily is probably more valuable than what I just showed you for that purpose, if that makes sense. Then at the end of the year, I have more confidence in the kind of measurements we'll do with our end of the year assessments, because they're meant to identify students who would need interventions. So I think that's a good way of looking at how we use the data collection that the state required versus what we'll be doing at the end of the year. So I still think it was useful, and I think it was great that the state had us go through that exercise. It was, yeah, it was very time consuming, but it caused a lot of really good conversation. I just don't love, like, I don't like data that feels a little arbitrary, and you know, having to shoehorn those three categories it doesn't sit well with me necessarily, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so for parents who may have concerns about where their children may fall, it may be, as you say, teachers will be reaching out, but we've heard in SIP throughout the year from some of the administrators about some of the kind of reinforcement that teachers are doing as they introduce new concepts. If it's like a math skill, let's say, that builds on something that may have been taught in a previous school year or maybe even earlier in this year, there's usually a little bit of kind of reinforcement of a prior skill before something new is taught. And I think you've said, I know Liz D'Alessandro has said that the teachers are working on reinforcing even more that type of kind of spiraling and building on learning, so that right, so that if there's something that might not have been rock solid before, there's an opportunity to reinforce that going forward as well. So
right, that's
that
exactly
may give parents a little bit. Okay.
Right. Spiraling is important for us to point out, in that we're not skipping skills. We're covering the content and the curriculum as for continuity and consistency's sake. And then when we come back around and spiral that, meaning you kind of reintroduce it again in the fall, then that's when it can be reinforced and maybe taken to a deeper level. The deeper dives that might normally take place within the curriculum and repeated quite a bit, we'll probably need to come back to that in the fall, but it fits. I guess what I'm saying is any level that we didn't reach, and math is a good example this year, it's not like it'll be a hole that isn't filled, because we still covered all of the skills. And next year when we spiral through those again, we could take time as necessary and develop, and dive a little more deeply. And then over the course of the year, we expect to get back to where we normally would be, especially with a few additional supports.
Okay. Does anyone have any other comments or questions about Paul's presentation?
I just wanted to make, it's not really a question, it's more of a comment, but I would be interested in Paul's feedback if he wants to give it now or later. But the educator in me is somewhat pleased that our students are not assessed purely through traditional exams, because there are a lot of flaws with that. And I wonder if the pandemic, one of the silver linings is this kind of required transition to more project-based learning and project-based assessment, just because of the infeasibility of testing for all the reasons you talked about. And so I just wanted to kind of make that comment to say that I hope that this is something that maybe kind of changes parts of how we assess our students, and also just wanted to see if, Paul, you wanted to weigh in on that, but no pressure. But I just wanted to make that comment, because I think that's it's, as we all know, it's also part of the kind of cutting edge of education, is more of that project based, more of that team based, more of where you're incorporating, you're learning the knowledge, you're learning the information, but you're also producing knowledge and information based on that, rather than just regurgitating. So trying to be optimistic.
Right, no, very, very well said. And there are silver linings. There are significant silver linings that will come out of this, meaning that teachers have advanced their repertoire dramatically as to how they can assess and engage students. So a lot of what we looked at earlier in the year as far as research and just articles and guidance was all about how to engage students. And I'm not saying that we were able to engage everyone in the hybrid, but we did everything. We sure tried everything that we could. And evolving out of the engagement piece was, of course, now how do we assess where they're at? So teachers have developed all kinds of new strategies for assessing where students are at. And I think a lot of that will carry over into when we're out of the pandemic and fully back in person and in full time. So I also think part of what you were saying about project-based learning and assessing in a more cumulative way or in a portfolio way, we were all moving toward that for years, and I would love to see more and more of that, and this has fostered that. So yeah, I think those are silver linings. You expressed it well, I just echoed it.
That's good. And it may be a good segue too to bring up something that we have talked about within SIP. Paul, you've circulated information to the full board about that the high school is looking at doing alternate assessments in lieu of final examinations for this June, correct? For year end?
Yes. It's really a great way to allow for more instruction, which is what we've been looking forward to having, not having the standardized tests, and not having final exams would also allow us to do that, in the same reason that we did that for the midterms. But certainly I know the board is committed to making sure that we're able to assess where students are at and to be able to gauge their progress and also how well we've delivered the curriculum. So sort of similar to what we did for the state upload. That's why I kind of saw it differently from 6 to 12 versus the K through 5. Similarly highlighting, but now we have more time to do it. But similarly pinpointing assessments between now and the end of the year that can either be considered, collected as a portfolio type of expression of what students know, or in the case of math, there are just a couple key unit assessments that really could serve the same purpose. So not having finals has a lot of upside, and the little bit, and I have one more big upside, but a little bit of a downside might be that we are accustomed to having that one document that seem to calibrate all the skills that we expect students to be able to achieve at the end of the year. Under our current circumstances, especially at the high school level, there are still and will still be students working from home, and to give a fair exam where everyone's, to give an exam where we can count on the data being valid and we can count on, students being engaged in the exam and not in any kind of way, going online on another device while they're in an exam. Those kinds of things are really hard to control under our circumstances, especially at the high school level where we have exams. So for fidelity of data, sense and grades, to be fair across the board, we will be looking to do a different kind of data collection so that if we're going to go to that extent, it'll be worthwhile. We think if we went through the lost instruction, had the final exams, that data would then not really be valid or as useful as we would want it to be to go through all that. So if you had to flip a coin, I would rather have more instruction time and alternate assessments than assessments that we're doing, just to do because we have to have something. So I agree with the high school that it would really be a better way to assess where students are at and to not have finals.
And the ability to look ahead and plan so that each class, each course, each grade level had appropriate assessments that could be sort of determined in advance instead of looking backward and kind of trying to like retrofit into the state categories, let's say, which we had to do for the spring. By being able to make a decision and plan ahead for it, those assessments can be even more meaningful, right, Paul?
Very much so. I mean, Mary Spendis and her team have been eager to get started, but they certainly wanted to allow the board to have conversations about this, which we have by putting out the information in advance. But they're eager to get started, and they're hoping to get the green light, tomorrow as far as doing that. And the supervisors rattled off a bunch of good ideas for doing that already. And yeah, so we do have more time to be thoughtful about it than when, the state said, hey, quick, give us a bunch of data so we can put in a waiver, which I appreciated that they did. But this is a little different. We have a little bit more time to plan and target things. And I think it could wind up being really good use of time, and we could get some really good information.
Yeah, makes sense to me. But I was privy to that full conversation before. Do any board members have questions about alternate assessments at the high school? If we go that route, which it sounds like we will? No? Okay. All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Paul, for putting that together and for keeping tabs on everything. It'll be interesting to hear how things shake out for the end of the year and what the summer plans end up being. So keep us posted. Okay. All right. Then just, sorry, we're still in curriculum. If there's no further comments or questions, I would like the board to approve curriculum items 1 and 2. Could I get a second, please?
Second.
Mike, thanks. I saw your hand first. At that same SIP meeting where we discussed the assessment data, Tom Weber came and reviewed revised curricula for 4 high school music classes, all vocal music, and 2 intermediate school orchestra classes. So those are on the curricula, and 1 student intern is curriculum item number 2. So any questions or comments? No? Okay. Dana?
Sahar Aziz,
Yes.
Mike Beelan,
Yes.
Brendan Galligan,
Yes.
Rob Garrison,
Yes.
Layla Morelli,
Yes.
Gretchen Olig,
Yes.
Tara Porto,
Yes.
Sonal Patel,
Yes.
Amy Root.
Yes. Thank you. Our next SIP meeting is going to be next Thursday, May 6th at 9 in the morning. And regular members, I had circulated a question if you might be willing to consider moving the June meeting. So if that doesn't sound familiar to you, I'll send that around again just to see if we might be able to move the June meeting. But May 6th, Thursday morning, it's on the calendar. Okay. Thank you. Then moving on to finance, Rob?
Yes, thank you. The committee did not meet since our last meeting. We do have a meeting though this Friday at 9 a.m. I believe it's 9 a.m. And the main issue that was discussed tonight was the budget, but I do have 14 resolutions that I'd like a second on. Sonal, thank you. I will point out 3 items. Number 5, I'd like to point out because I'm not sure if we've done this yet this calendar year. But as part of our ability with school contracts law, it does permit the award of contracts without competitive bids for professional services that require licensing and are regulated by law. So you'll see that's with agenda item number 5 with a special education professional being hired. And then I do want to point out 2 gifts. Item number 12, where it's a gift of $208.70 from the Jefferson Elementary School PTO to pay for the replacement of parts on a piece of playground equipment. And then number 13, item number 13 is accept a gift of $1,000 from the Westfield High School PTSO for Dr. Deborah Gilboa, MD, who will speak about resiliency at a high school virtual presentation. Dana, roll call, please.
Sahar Aziz,
Yes.
Mike Beelan,
Yes.
Brendan Galligan,
Yes.
Rob Garrison,
Yes.
Layla Morelli,
Yes.
Gretchen Olig,
Yes.
Tara Porto,
Yes.
Sonal Patel,
Yes.
Amy Root.
Yes.
Thank you, Dana.
All right, great. Thank you. Technology, Gretchen, any report?
No report tonight. Brian, I loop back with you soon so we can get another meeting on the agenda.
Okay. We have a small note for the record that I would just like to make sure the board sees. And then the next item is unfinished business. Does anybody have anything to address? I'm going to go ahead and just jump in here because I saw we had a question about it. It's not really an agenda item. I'm sure people are curious about the superintendent search. We are very close to being able to make some type of announcement at a board meeting soon, but not yet. So we're crossing T's, dotting I's. The executive county superintendent will also review the contract. And when we have something we can share with the public, which we hope will be very soon, we will be very happy to do that. So definitely things are proceeding in a timeline that we're comfortable with, and we hope to be able to have something to share to the public extremely soon. Okay. Any new business? No. Any liaison reports? Yep, Layla.
I attended Jefferson's general PTO meeting on the 15th, and Dr. Hung said that the remote week was a great idea because there was a lot of traveling last minute, and that 95% of Jefferson was back in person as of Monday, and they were really excited to report that for our 4th and 5th graders, in-person band lessons had started, utilizing the halls and some outside resources. So they were excited to have everyone back and to start resuming whatever normalcy they could. So.
Great. Yep, Brendan?
On April 14th, I sat in on the executive committee of the NJSIAA, and one piece of legislation that's pending with that group is a change to the calendars for high school sports, trying to synchronize seasons between sports so that all the fall sports, except for football, will start and end on the same date. All the winter sports will start and end on the same date, plus or minus a couple days, and the same thing with spring sports, so that there's no overlap with seasons. Because current rules prohibit students from playing two sports at the same time, or requires a waiver. So it will change tournament dates on calendars and the preseason start dates for practices. It won't go into effect until the 22-23 school year, and will be ratified at their June meeting. More on that if anybody has any questions, but anytime there's changes to sports, people want to know. So I'm trying to give as much of a heads up there as possible.
Yeah, this is Mike. I was at the Edison PTSO meeting. Just a quick update that they are looking, given all the, obviously COVID was always a topic of discussion, but they are looking to how they can honor all the various 8th graders that are going to move up to maybe a gift each day of the week, or they're just planning different things. So there's a lot of activity going down there just to make sure the kids try to have as normal a moving up as possible.
Great, thank you. I attended the high school PTSO meeting on April 8th, and they were at that point looking ahead to how the schedule might change going forward, which is something that got addressed. Mrs. Bendis sent out a note last week that had to put a bit of a pause in the rollout of in-person addition to in-person instruction time at the high school, because COVID levels are not quite low enough yet. And certainly we've seen in the interim that contact tracing is still required and quarantining is still required for anybody that's within 6 feet. So even though we are feeling a little bit more comfortable about bringing more of our students back, it still has an impact when someone tests positive for who needs to quarantine. So that wasn't really a PTSO discussion. I'm sort of using that as a segue. The PTSO people were very focused as well on year-end acknowledgements for graduates, and involved to the extent that they could be, you know, in working with the administrators to help support the students. And they were very excited. I haven't heard how it worked out, but the next PTSO meeting will be next week to hear how community service week went. Those students are really committed at the high school, and it's really encouraging to see that, you know, despite everything that has gone on this year, that there's still that kind of commitment to community outreach and doing things for people in our community and the surrounding communities that need more help. So, so I will have more to share after the next meeting. Any other liaison reports?
I have one thing to share. I wasn't really planning to, but I think I will. I'm not sure if everybody's aware that Phil Israel, the director of the Westfield Memorial Library, has put in his notice for retirement, and we are underway to find a replacement. But tomorrow night there's a public meeting, and there will be a tribute to Phil Israel. There will also be a video, and there will be a certification from Mayor Brindle. So if anybody wants to join that public meeting, they can find more information at the Westfield Memorial Library website, but it should be nice.
Great, thanks for letting us know about that. Okay, all right, if there's no further liaison reports, now members of the public, this is your final time. We'll open the Q&A session to recognize the public for comments on any item, agenda or otherwise. Again, as before, if you wish to speak, if you could type your name and address into, well, your name into the Q&A box, and then repeat your name and your address when Brian unmutes you. We'll see if anyone has other comments at this point.
Okay, I have Sean Aiken. Sean, again, please state your name and address, and you have 3 minutes.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I just had a question of happy that everybody's back in school for the 5 mornings a week, and now we encounter logistics problems because dismissal is all at the same time across middle and elementary. Has there been any thought to staggering it by just even a little bit to deal with the logjam at either pickup?
I'm guessing we're listening to comments for now, and if there are responses, we can add them at the end? Right, okay. So we'll listen for comments now, and if there are responses, we can add them at the end.
Yes, excellent.
Okay, next we have Rob Bonaccio. Rob, again, please state your name and address, and you have 3 minutes.
Sure, Rob Bonaccio, 528 Forest. I feel like I get on here at the general public comment time and I repeat myself a lot, and unfortunately I kind of have to do it again. Comparing and contrasting, I said earlier I was very impressed with Ms. Sullivan's budget presentation and her ability to anticipate and sort of get out ahead of the things that were probably going to be of the biggest concern to parents when they're looking at the tax dollars that we spend versus the value that we're getting out of them. And I very much appreciated that. And if you look at tonight's agenda, I would, and listen to the public comments in the past, you'd see there are probably 3 things that have concerned parents greatly. One is, to what extent are we going to be able to get our kids back to a more full day education? The second is the superintendent search. And the third is what real effect is this hybrid learning and the effects of the pandemic having on our kids. And if you've read the board's agenda, you would have had no idea that there was a quite detailed presentation by Mr. Pinero, which I greatly appreciate all the work that went into that. It was excellent data. You would have not known that restart had been discussed in committee and was going to be brought up again. And unfortunately, the superintendent search, which is quite important for the long-term future, was an aside. Oh, by the way, we had a discussion about it. A question came up. I guess we should tell you where we're at with this. I don't know if it's a disconnect between what parents need to hear in a manner of communication, but continuing to put these issues not at the forefront of the agenda and kind of sliding them in under committee reports so parents have no idea they're coming up is not helpful. And I think it puts parents in a position where they're saying, well, what in the world is going on? And we have to keep having these discussions over and over again, as opposed to just putting them out transparently. I mean, I hope Mr. Pinero's presentation, which was, again, very formative, will be out on the district's website so we can look at it, and that's wonderful, but it doesn't give parents any idea to come in and check in and see what it is that's going on. And then we talk about these restart discussions and getting folks back long term, and all the comments I hear are, well, we're still trying to figure out lunch, but let me explain to you why everything parents are concerned about as far as who's open and who isn't is not correct and is a load of garbage. And I see one board member who I won't call out rolling their eyes when they say, well, parents think that they're supposed to come back.
30 seconds.
Camera, I do see it. So I'd like to see this board be a bit more, I don't know, I don't think it's purposeful. Yeah, at least I hope it's not, but I'd like to see a bit more transparency regarding important issues with these. And from the superintendent search, I'd love some information on their answers to pretty central questions like what is their position on reopening? I think before we choose somebody, parents would like to see that in a generic fashion, not necessarily by name. Thank you.
Next, we have Kyle George. Kyle, I will unmute you. Give me a second. Okay, Kyle, you're unmuted again. Would you please state your name and address for the record? And you have 3 minutes.
Sure. Kyle George, 605 Short Hills Court. Let me pull up So first of all, regarding the plan for addressing learning gap slides and the metrics that made it clear we're not in good shape, the slides are missing a very simple solution that was not on the slides. Open the schools for full day in person. Nothing's going to work except that. We did a lot of talking about summer school and changing the way that we do tests by basically not doing them. And we're celebrating not passing those tests as a silver lining. You know, there are plenty of remote programs at great universities that are you know, bachelor degree, master degree programs that are remote, including assessments. I mean, why are we not talking about opening the schools as part of the solution on those slides? It's not even mentioned. On a different topic, I sent an email to Dr. Dolan and the board last night entitled Proposal for School Assembly Transparency. My email was inspired by what I believe Mr. Galligan called a little while ago the robust discussion from the last board meeting. I'd like to read parts of it now in this meeting for the public's benefit. Here it is. I was alarmed to hear about the recent assembly at Westfield High School in which the speaker made anti-Semitic and anti-American remarks and how it was handled by the district. I'm deeply concerned about how the district governs non-academic assemblies overall, K through 12. From the last board meeting, it's clear that there is no coherent governance for assemblies. I'd like to propose what I think is a simple policy that can be applied across K through 12 that I believe balances the need to have assemblies, parents' rights to be involved in their children's education, that not every assembly is right for the broad age spectrum of children in a single school. There's a big difference between a first grader and a fifth grader, for example, and overall transparency. For your consideration, 1 week advance notice to parents of any assembly, including the names of the speakers and a published agenda for parental review. 2, provide the name of a sponsoring faculty member and the name of a faculty member who has reviewed the agenda. 3, provide the name of any organizations the speaker is affiliated with and who is paying for the speaker's visit. 4, assemblies should be default opt-in, but parents should have the option to opt out of assemblies without reprisal towards their children if they choose to do so. 5, make it clear to administrators that they have an obligation to step in if it strays off topic. And 6, make video available after the assembly for parents to stay informed and involved in their children's education. The district wants parents to be involved, and there's no better way to keep parents involved than let us have access to all the materials and content being used to educate our children. If we've learned anything during COVID, it's that we have all the technology we need to facilitate this parental involvement now and post-COVID. I can't imagine that this policy proposal would be controversial. When I was a child, paper permission slips were required for things like field trips and outside speakers, and it was a great way for parents to know what's going on. I sincerely hope the superintendent and the board will consider this proposal without hesitation or delay. Please act decisively and expediently. Thank you.
Next, we have Kara Goldman. Kara, I'll unmute you now. Again, could you please state your name and address for the record? And you have 3 minutes. Kara, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Kara Goldman, 1024 Harding Street. Unfortunately, I was in a position last week where my child, who's a middle school student, was quote unquote exposed to COVID. And she was sent home for 14 days to cry and sulk in her room. I went to the principal, I went to the school nurse, I went to the district nursing supervisor, and I went to Megan Avalone. She is a student who already had COVID. I have proven that she has antibodies, and she was not allowed to return to school. This policy should be readdressed. This is a very unusual circumstance where we have children who can't yet be vaccinated but have proven immunity outside of the 90-day window in which the district thinks is, it's magically immune. And it's a terrible, alienating, isolating situation for an 11-year-old to be in. And this is no way for children to receive an education at infinitum. I don't know what the end is here. Secondly, the mayor announced that it is published that the school can use the 3 feet within 3 feet as acceptable and be exempt from quarantine if the level of COVID activity is moderate in our district. So at the time that this happened, the level of COVID activity was moderate as announced by the mayor in our district. And yet somehow, because she was 3.5 feet from a positive case, she was needing to quarantine. It was the level of COVID activity has been high in our county, but it does seem to state in our policies that it's the town that matters and not the county. So if we could get some clarification on that, why we aren't following what we put out, number one, and number two is what is the solution for kids who are in this situation, and why can't proof of antibodies be used as evidence that plus a negative PCR test, that she's safe and not contributing to the spread of COVID. Thank you. I would like answers on this, by the way. I don't know why you guys just sit there and are silent, but I would like somebody to actually get back to me with the response to this particular question. Thank you.
Next, I have Vanessa Schwartz. Vanessa, I'll unmute you now. You're unmuted. Vanessa, again, please state your name and address for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Hello, it's Vanessa Schwartz, 812 St. Mark's Ave. Thank you, everybody. I apologize if this was already brought up. I had a question about the high school. I'm excited about the idea of getting rid of the cohorts and having the kids have the 4-day option, or if people still want to stay remote, that's an option as well. I was disappointed that it got held up, but I understand, you know where it was coming from. I'd read the guidelines, and I did understand. We have an issue in Westfield being part of a county that may have had some difficult numbers recently, and perhaps Westfield as well. But can we differentiate ourselves from the county when we're trying to assess getting our kids back in the 4 half days and look at what's going on district wide as opposed to the county? If cases are lower in Westfield, can these kids get back to 4 half days? What's gonna get us there? And I guess that's basically my question. Really would love to see some more discussion on what the plan is for the high school. Certainly September sounds great. I'm afraid we're going to be in the same boat by the end of the summer. I don't know what will change. Hopefully vaccinations will make a big difference, and probably will, God willing. But I do not want to be sitting here in August and find out that my high school age children are only going to school 2 days a week at this point. So that's just my biggest concern. Thank you, everybody.
Amy, I have 2 questions from Shafali Gandhi. Shafali Gandhi. Her address is 934 Prospect Street. Unfortunately, the microphone is not working on her computer. So she just asked these 2 questions. First, for students that are fully vaccinated, will they have to quarantine if they are considered close contact? And then second, with the new mask rules, will fully vaccinated students continue to have to wear masks outdoors for gym or sports? Thank you. And I don't see any other questions at this time from anyone. I'm sorry. Stephanie just popped up on the screen. Stephanie Siegel. Stephanie, let me unmute your microphone. Okay, Stephanie, you're unmuted. And again, please state your name and address, and you have 3 minutes.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Stephanie Siegel, 605 Short Hills Court. From Governor Murphy's update on Monday, we learned that 246 school districts are now reopened full-time in New Jersey. More are scheduled to reopen fully in the coming weeks. Will Westfield schools reopen fully before the end of this school year? If not, why? All schools have the same challenge: finite resources and space, and high COVID activity level index scores across the state. Many other districts in those same high COVID activity level index score areas of the state are the ones that are reopening. Why are they able to fully reopen and we can't? How are they able to have lunch at school and our kids can't? Have you researched the plans in these now fully reopened school districts to see how they're able to do it? We know that they aren't all able to meet the most extreme restrictions of the guidelines, but they are doing the best they can to meet as much of the guidelines as possible while balancing the needs of the students to be in school full time. Why are we not doing the same? My next concern is that today I learned that Westfield High School has dropped 13 places in U.S. News and World Report's 2021 Best High School National Rankings. This ranking is based on data from the 2018 to 2019 school year. I understand that national rankings are not the full measure of a school district, but they should not be disregarded or ignored. After over a year without full-time in-person instruction and the assessment results just shared by Mr. Pinero, I am worried that our kids will be severely disadvantaged in their ability to compete academically against kids nationally and internationally who have had minimal to no disruption in their education. While my kids are in the early stages of their academic journey, the repercussions of the decisions and choices made in this last year will last long beyond the next few graduating classes. What is the actual plan to correct this? A little bit of summer school and changing how we evaluate children in their progress is not the answer. My final concern is regarding the discussion that took place at the end of the last board meeting. When will the Chris Campbell Assembly video be made publicly available to all parents in the district? Hearing from other parents, it sounded like the assembly was full of anti-American and anti-Semitic rhetoric. I sincerely hope we are not providing a platform to legitimize hateful speech in our schools. The district needs to focus on reopening schools and academics first and foremost. We must prioritize improving the fundamental academic skills of our students in the areas of reading, writing, math, and science. Thank you.
You're muted, Brian.
Next, we have Rob Selvers. Rob, I will unmute you. Rob, you're unmuted. Please state your name and address for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Hi, thank you. My name is Rob Selvers. My address is 1000 Coolidge Street. I guess my only question, and has a few subparts, is like all of the other parents that are on the call, I am interested in learning what the reopening plan is, both for the remainder of this year and more importantly, to make sure that we are reopened full-time with students having lunch beginning in September. To that end, I am wondering if the school board has a plan to reopen. If so, what is it and when will it be published or announced to the parents of the district? And if not, why isn't there a plan yet as to reopening more fully this year and again, more importantly, next year at this point? Thank you.
Amy, at this time, I don't see any other questions or any other names.
Okay. Dr. Dolan, were there any items from comments that you'd like to address? And just to clarify too, for those who have tuned in, the function on the WebEx says Q&A, but the part of the public meeting, and it's a structure that we follow because we arrange our agenda this way, is that this is a time for public comment. So we'll try to address what we can right now, but we don't engage in dialogue at this point in the meeting because it's a time for us to hear you and to hear what your concerns are. So we'll try to address what we can now. Some specific situations we may not be able to address in the meeting, but could certainly be followed up by an email if people feel that it wasn't being addressed. Sorry, Dr. Dolan, to preface that, but I just thought comment versus Q&A might be helpful to reinforce.
No, thank you very much. I appreciate it. So I'll try to address try to explain a few points, actually. So just to be clear, the schools right now still are in constant communication with the Department of Health because there are, as anyone who's followed the data that the town has put forward, a large percentage of the current cases are from school-aged children, right? So as the one parent pointed out, parents are being contacted because although the rules say you can be somewhere between 3 and 6 feet in a school, the contact rules still say the same, that it's 6 feet. And I know this parent, the parent who spoke, I know her particular story because the principal told me, and I understand her frustration. I want to be really clear. We are not the health professionals. We reach out, we rely on the Department of Health. We don't hide behind it, that's been said. We don't hide behind it. But the fact of the matter is I'm not the one to go to about antibodies. It's just a fact, nor is any principal. We listen to the parents when they have a concern, but then we go to the health professionals and the current rules. I understand that the current rules are kind of confusing. For example, someone just said with the new rules, do kids still, do students, if they go out for gym or something, do they still have to wear masks? Well, my understanding from reading the rules that just came out today from the CDC, those rules about not having to wear the mask are pretty specific to if you, I mean, it said if you are out by yourself, if you are out walking with your family and you are not around other people, if you're not in a large gathering, you don't have to wear your mask. Well, a phys ed class in our schools is a large gathering. So my understanding from reading that is that, yes, we have to continue to wear masks. Our students have to continue to wear masks in large gatherings like that where there are a number of people. I will also tell you that these rules change constantly, which is why we are constantly in communication with the departments of health. As to what other districts are doing, honestly, I really do try to pay attention to that. And every board meeting I've had for, I think, 2 months or so, we've had for 2 months, I've heard examples of which school is doing this, which school is doing that, and I do try to follow up on it. It was mentioned briefly before, but maybe I'll mention it again. I am totally impressed by the parents in Westfield. We do, in our elementary schools, as was mentioned, we have well over 90% of our students attending in person, right? And they are attending for 5 mornings a week. That is not the case across the state, and it is very easy to find districts where 30% of students are in, 40% of students are in. You can do a lot more if you only have 30 or 40% of your students. We have over 90, and we're thrilled that we do, but that does make it more difficult. To someone else's point, it was mentioned that so many districts are listed as fully open. A school district that has students coming in, say elementary students or middle school students coming in 5 mornings a week, that is defined as fully open by the state. It does not mean that they were there from morning till afternoon with lunch in between. Fully open means 5 days a week, according to the state at this point. And do we continue to work on this year? Absolutely. Absolutely, and we're hoping to come up with more ways for in-person learning. One parent mentioned she was disappointed that we weren't able to bring the high school students back this week. I would agree with her. I was disappointed, so was Mrs. Asfendis, and we hope to do that, but we have to watch those numbers, and we continue to do so. It is true that the state, when they look at numbers and make decisions for districts, they look at the Cali score, which is actually reads beyond one county, right? And so that's a constant discussion. Do we have to follow everything for the Central East region, which is our region? Couldn't we, I've asked that question at least 20 times. Can't we just focus on local, right? So we continue to ask the questions. We continue to try to find more opportunities for in-person this year at all levels in different ways. We do have another Restart Committee meeting this week. And as for next year, as was mentioned before, the state has just been developing groups to look at suggestions for next year, but the governor has been, I won't say adamant, the governor has been clear that he expects everyone to be in for full days with lunch, etc. My personal feeling, if we can get some students in this year at certain grades for lunch, as is allowed, I think that would be great because it'll give us some practice for next year. Am I hopeful for that? I am. Do I work towards it? Absolutely. Are the principals, our teachers working towards that? They absolutely are. So we are doing everything we can to try to get our students in as much as possible this year. And certainly next year, as was mentioned earlier, I'm very happy to hear that our high school students who are 16 and above, they are now eligible for vaccines, and they are getting their vaccines. Supposedly, I hope, I've heard that hopefully in the near future, those students from 12 to 16 might be able to get their vaccines. I hope that's the case. I do think that's part of the story, and I'm glad that the people in Westfield, A, are sending their students to school, and B, that they're, the adults and the students are getting their vaccines, because that does bring us a great deal of hope.
All right, thank you. I hope that's helpful. I found it helpful. All right. At this point, I'm going to make a motion for the board to approve the following resolution. Be it resolved that the Board of Education move into private session for the purpose of discussing matters rendered confidential by state and federal law and harassment, intimidation, and bullying incidents. And be it further resolved that any discussion held by the board which need not remain confidential, and the results of the discussion will be made public as soon as practicable. Could I have a second, please?
Second.
Thanks, Brendan. All right, voice vote, right? All in favor of going to private session? Rob? Great, thank you.
Aye.
You could say no, but I had a feeling you wanted to say yes. Okay, all right, then we will adjourn the meeting and go over to the private link. Thank you very much.